Mr. Speaker.
Chris Bishop.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's been a sad 7 years for the Labor Party, but yesterday marked the nadir of their trashing of their proud economic record, forgetting the lessons of history and trashing a once proud economic legacy. Because yesterday was the day that the Labor Party jumped the shark. Yesterday was the day that marked the absolute culmination of their return to the politics of nostalgia, a return to the halcyon days of the 1970s. Well, actually, the 1970s weren't a great time in New Zealand, and it took the Labor Party and a Labor government to sort it out. Sir, I want to briefly canvass the three areas in which Labor is trashing its legacy. Firstly, let's talk about trade and openness to the world. It was the Labor government of the 1980s, sir, that slashed tariffs, that courageously ended all state support for our farming sector. It was a Labor government, the fifth Labor government, that signed the China Free Trade Agreement. Why? Because it knew then, as it does not know now, but it knew then that New Zealand's competitiveness and New Zealand's future prosperity depends on our engagement with the outside world, of selling more to the world and being connected to the global economy. Now what do we find? Now we find a Labor Party that is fundamentally opposed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that it started when it was in government, that Phil Goff and Helen Clark kick-started on the eve of the 2008 election campaign and trumpeted during the campaign as one of their signal economic achievements. Well, now we find the Labor Party, with the honourable exception of Phil Goff, who, because he's running for Auckland Mayor, is somehow allowed to support the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, even though we know that David Shearer and other MPs inside the Labor caucus also support it. Well, now we find the party position is that they're opposed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. There is not a Labor Party leader still alive that doesn't back the TPP. Helen Clark, Phil Goff, Mike Moore, all these leaders who knew that New Zealand's future depended on being connected to the world, backed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, apart from the modern-day Labor caucus. And, sir, actually, recently we find them actually descending into gutter politics. Firstly, we had Phil Twyford's disgraceful smear campaign against people with Chinese-sounding names, using Rob Salmon's Bayesian analysis to somehow justify it last year. And today we have Andrew Little going out to the hut and criticising ethnic restaurants, talking about how, well, I'm not sure if we should have Indian and Chinese restaurants. Perhaps we could source the domestic labour from New Zealand to make Chinese and Indian food, sir. So this is, as Phil Quinn, the Labor activist, said on Twitter, sir, this is a regressive and depressing view of New Zealand. Let's talk, sir, about monetary policy. In the 1980s, the Labor government and the Labor Party established an independent reserve bank, one of their proudest achievements. Why? To take interest rates decisions and monetary policy out of the hands of politicians. Now what do we have? Well, we have Andrew Little brain farting his way to Parliament, talking about how we've got to put the control of interest rates back into the hands of politicians. Pressured into it by the media, he suddenly decides to announce that the Labor Party will, if necessary, legislate for interest rates to be decided by politicians. Sir, this is a recipe for disaster. This was a recipe for disaster in the 1970s, and it will be, sir, in 2016 or 27, whenever the Labor Party happens to get back into government, sir. This is something, sir, that the Labor Party is going to come to regret. And we know that they're nervous about this, sir, because the Labor Party MPs all got sent an email from the Leader's office saying to them, don't meet with any banks or the bankers' associations without running it past us first, sir. So we know that they're pretty embarrassed about this, sir, and they're leaking like a sieve. Thirdly, sir, let's talk about tertiary policy. Phil Goff sits over there, and Phil Goff was the Labor Party leader that introduced student fees. And the other day I went back and actually looked up the Education Amendment Bill 1988. And why was Phil Goff and the fourth Labor government introducing student fees, which was the precursor to the student loan scheme? Why? Because he wanted to broaden access to tertiary education. He wanted to increase participation. He wanted more people to go to university. Great policy, and the student loan scheme is one of the most progressive and forward-thinking and equitable public policy schemes ever devised by any New Zealand government. But now what do we have? Well, we have Andrew Little and Chris Hipkins and Grant Robertson returning to their roots, doing what they do best, which is going back to student unionism and pumping up more money for student support. It's ineffective, it will be inequitable, and it won't work. So this is a Labour Party that is stuck in the politics of nostalgia and wants to take New Zealand back to the 1970s, not forward.